Hello friends, it is June, which means we're halfway through the year, and apparently the cool thing to do on booktube is the mid-year freakout tag. Now, I don't know if it's due to pomposity or due to neglect of amazing contemporary works, but the freakout tag questions don't quite fit my reading style. I think it's primarily because I don't read much fantasy or YA, but at the same time, a lot of the questions do pertain to a lot of the literature and classic literature that I read. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to answer most of those questions, and then I have a little bit of a twist or a different interpretation of some of the other questions. So without further ado, let's get started. The first question of this tag is the best book you've read so far in 2024, and that has to be Solenoid by Mircea Cărtărescu. This book had so much praise and hype going into it, and it still exceeded the expectations. It follows this Romanian teacher in Bucharest, and it just touches on everything from existential problems to facing death to the metaphysical. It reads almost Kafkaesque and has many Kafkaesque scenarios and themes and situations throughout. If you like long-winded, hyper-conscious prose, this book is it. It's going to be a high recommendation to almost everyone, and yeah, I can't wait to read more of Cărtărescu. The one note I want to make, and kind of maybe an extension of this tag, is one book I keep coming back to that I finished right at the beginning of this year is In Quiet Flows the Dawn by Mikhail Sholokhov. Something about this book, it's not going to be probably my best book of the year. It doesn't beat out Solenoid, but damn, it's close. I don't want to spend too long on talking about this. You follow individuals and families within the Don Cossacks, which are the Slavic warriors along the Don River, and you follow them through a period of peace, through World War I, and then into revolutionary times within Russia, and then into civil war. And you really see how ruthless warfare makes people, how brutal they can be, how war times turn brother against brother, citizen against citizen, how it ravages communities even when they're away from the battlefield, what it does to the women, the children, the fathers at home. And the writing was so rich and vivacious, specifically the war depictions, but also how ideologies can completely, again, ravage a country, I should say, and community overall. Just to read off a quick quote, I can kill a man without sighing over it. I have no pity. And then later on, you mustn't kill an animal unless it's necessary, but destroy man. He's a heathen, unclean. He poisons the earth. His life is like a toadstool. So again, it's just one of those beautiful books that depicts both the darkest elements and shades of humanity, yet also still has light and hope at the end for humanity. The next question is the best sequel you've read so far in 2024. And I'm actually going to change this to best short story I've read in 2024. And that would be The Dream of a Ridiculous Man by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I haven't heard anyone mention the short story before. And even if they have, it's not widely talked about. Obviously, Dostoevsky's novels are his shining star, and rightly so. And also, White Nights gets a lot of buzz. And that's a phenomenal short story as well. But The Dream of a Ridiculous Man, I loved it. It was in this edition by the Modern Library of Classics, but I'm sure you can find it in other collections as well. But essentially, you follow this nihilistic character who's in full despair mode. He's just about to commit suicide, and he's like, let me sleep on it. I got the gun loaded, but I'll do it in the morning. I'll do it tomorrow. And he has this transformative, spiritualistic moment through this dream, this awakening, basically spiritually, that goes on. And what happens is he gets transported to this Adam and Eve type of paradise, this Garden of Eden type of setting, where he meets these citizens or these inhabitants who are full of love and happiness. They know no shame, they know no disgust, they don't lie, they don't know suffering. And he says, quote, but as soon as I realized that their knowledge was derived from and fostered by emotions other than those to which we were accustomed on earth, and that their aspirations too were quite different, they desired nothing. They were at peace with themselves. They did not strive to gain knowledge of life as we strive to understand it, because their lives were full. So they didn't seek out science. They didn't seek out rationalism, which, if you know about Dostoevsky, he's very critical of this excessive leap towards rationalism or science as being the kind of panacea to all of our problems and all of our suffering. and that's mostly explored through Notes from Underground, but also in his novels as well. But what happens slowly is the man, although he notices that it's perfect here, they're happy, instead of thinking I need to be more like them, he slowly corrupts them. He kind of explains how it is on Earth. He kind of teaches them about suffering and shame and guilt, and embarrassment and lying and all of this. And slowly you just see how uh, this paradise turns into Earth, and all the flaws of humanity start to leak out. And I just think the way that he does it in the dream is so artistic. Again, it's very much like Fallen Angel, Adam First Sin esque, in that way. So there's kind of some biblical similarities going on there. But it's a beautiful story to just kind of appreciate the beauty that life and humanity can contain, and just how we kind of defeat ourselves in a way, and we kind of corrupt ourselves through some of these mistaken pursuits that we have, whether it is excessive pursuit of knowledge or excessive pursuit of power, of wealth, of these different things that don't mean so much. And I like this one quote. I have it tabbed here. And I think this quote articulates Dostoevsky's gripe or criticism with this excessive emphasis upon science or rationalism or objectivity when we only live through subjectivity and consciousness. In this quote starting here, where he says, quote, "But we have science, and with its aid we shall again discover truth, though we shall accept it only when we perceive it with our reason. Knowledge is higher than feeling, and the consciousness of life is higher than life. Science will give us wisdom. Wisdom will reveal to us the laws, and the knowledge of the laws of happiness is higher than happiness." So this idea of truth and science will be more important than happiness itself, which is supposed to be ideally the purpose of obtaining knowledge and truth, right? Is to gain this happiness, to bring more well-being to all. At least you would presume. But that is The Dream of Ridiculous Man. A fairly short story, and I think a profound thought experiment, and entertaining as well. The next question is new release you haven't read yet but want to. And I don't read really any new releases, so I've changed this to author you haven't read yet but want to. And there's a ton of them. I've mentioned this on the channel multiple times. I still feel like I'm balancing a bit of trying to catch up and read all the classics, the must-reads, and then at the same time reading things that catch my spirit and curiosity at the same time, on top of getting amazing recommendations from you all, just trying to keep up. But to rattle off a few names: Ursula K. Le Guin, the Bronte sisters, Roberto Bolaño, Philip K. Dick, William Gaddis, Flannery O'Connor, Steinbeck, Don DeLillo, and plenty others as well. The next question is most anticipated release for the second half of the year, which I changed to most anticipated read for the second half of the year. And that, I think, is going to be Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman. I bought this fairly recently, and I didn't at the moment plan on reading it this year, especially with how thick this book is. You wouldn't think I'm trying to squeeze it into this year. But when I mentioned it in that video, I had so many comments recommending it. It's a balance of me loving Russian literature and then also learning the Russian language right now. I'm so absorbed and curious and fascinated with the culture in Soviet times and the people and the history of it all. So right now I'm just mentally absorbed by it. So I think Vasily Grossman, Life and Fate, is going to be one I squeeze in at the end of the year and maybe finish into 2025. But I've just heard so many great things, and it's moving up the chain. All right, the next part of this tag is biggest surprise. I'm going to interpret that in 3 different ways and give you 3 different books for it. First, 1984 by George Orwell. It wasn't as good as people make it out to be. Now, there might be some huge Orwellian fans out there, and I do want to give credit where credit is due. There are so many ideas in here, and dystopian concepts and scenarios that are so nuanced for the time, and I think he was very much a trailblazer in that way for setting the standard of what some kind of dystopian novel could look like. And terrifyingly, a lot of the things in this book aren't too far-fetched with how we live today and things we've experienced or seen in many countries. Yet, the plot kind of sucked. I mean, not only do you have a character that is kind of weak and cowardly, slightly misogynistic, and just overall bland. He's not very manly or heroic or anyone you really want to get behind. So you have a boring Winston Smith, and then his sidekick, Julia, also is boring and bland and unheroic and uninspiring. I mean, they never. And granted, I'm not saying I would do it in this society, but the whole point of this type of book, you think, is they're going to have some kind of, conspiratory underground group and they're going to fight back against the system. They never really even try. They take forever to even think about having any kind of resistance or pushback. And by the time they do, they fall right into the hands of the villain. And I don't know. I felt like the plot was boring and slow the whole middle of the book. Finally, once some action gets going, it just felt rushed. And I don't know. The ending wasn't great either. This book let me down. And so did, I'm not going to talk about it, but Fahrenheit 451, that plot sucked too. I don't know if that's a hot take or if anybody else relates, but that's one surprise. I was surprised how much that sucked, quite frankly. Again, there's merit to it in ways, but the plot itself, characters, I'll argue with you about that. The next book that's disappointed me was Emma by Jane Austen. So some of you that know or that follow the channel for a while have known I really like Jane Austen. I really enjoyed Pride and Prejudice. I read it with my wife. It was one of the first kind of romantic novels I had read, and first Austen novel. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. 5-star. I have a video about it on my channel. I was really impressed with it and how it was just paced very well. The character development was phenomenal. The ideologies blended in was tasteful. It was expertly done. But Emma just... what was this? I mean, every character was bland and unlikable. And I'm not going to say that every book needs to have likable characters. I've read very unlikable characters. I get why an author will do it and put them in certain places. But the characters weren't even interesting. And I know that apparently this book is supposed to have satirical elements to it and jokes that maybe aren't coming across to me. But... the plot was boring. Everything was just being drawn out. The characters, again, whether it was Emma herself or just dragging along her puppet of Harriet or Mr. Knightley, it was so boring. I was falling asleep reading it, and I wanted to like it. I bought this and Sense and Sensibility by Austen. I was like, oh, I'm going to be an Austen guy. I'm going to be reading her. I'm excited to after Pride and Prejudice. And this just let me down. I mean, it was bad. It was bad. You will be hard pressed to talk me into reading it again and giving it another shot. But you can try. And I will read more Austen, but this disappointed me. And last book that disappointed or surprised me was Being in Time by Martin Heidegger. Now, this book is infamous for being very, very complex, very confusing, abstruse, frankly, just obscure and nuts to read. And I thought I could understand it. I thought I could grasp some of it, enough of it, that with some supplementary podcasts and videos and notes, I would be able to tackle it like I've done other books, whether it's Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, whether it's Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. I was like, if I've done those books, I could handle some Hegel. Whether it's Phenomenology from Husserl, but I couldn't. I read, I think, 100 pages in, and I tapped out. I said, no, I'm going to force myself through another 400 pages for what? To know nothing? To know a few words that I don't know the concept? So I was surprised that I DNF'd this book. Was the surprise. The next question is favorite new author, debut, or new to you? And I've already talked about Mircea Cărtărescu, and that would be my answer. But since I've already talked about him and his book Solenoid, I'll give you another option, which would be Mikhail Bulgakov and his book, specifically The Master Margarita and The Heart of a Dog. The Master Margarita, one of my favorite books of the year. I've talked about it in a few videos. I'm surprised that some people actually don't like it and it does nothing for them. I found it completely atmospheric, magical, ideologically riveting and thought-provoking. I found it to be just the perfect length. It's just about 400 pages, full of action, full of charisma and amusement. Man, it's so rich. I mean, I cannot wait to try and read this in the native Russian in like a few years and just see how even higher of a level it is in its native tongue. But that book was amazing. I also picked up The Heart of a Dog, which is a short satirical work that he wrote as well. I'm really trying to scout out for a copy of, I believe it's called The White Guard. And there's one other work from him. And he also has some plays. One of those might be a play, for all I know. But Bulgakov is a very interesting writer, Ukrainian, obviously, essentially Russian at the same time under the Soviet control, dealt with a lot of censorship, was originally a doctor that became a playwright and author. Very interesting figure, let alone phenomenal author. So highly recommend him and would like to read more of him. The next question on this tag is newest fictional crush book that made you cry. I have nothing like that, but I changed it to book that made you sad, and that would be Stoner by John Williams. This book is pretty popular amongst booktube and talked about a good bit. It follows a man essentially throughout his entire life, and by the time you get to the ending, it is just so abysmal. You know, he hasn't lived the worst life ever. He hasn't made like the worst decisions ever, but you really just see quiet desperation. You see how passivity and how keeping things to your chest and not correcting a bad relationship, getting out of a marriage that's wrong for you, resentment, and these things can just eat at you to the point where you're on your deathbed and that was it, you know, and you just see the not the sad life of a man, but you just see, I don't know, when I read the book, it really made me reflect. And also earlier in the book, I think I was just having also an emotional day. Maybe I was just really stressed and whatever was going on in my life. But there's a scene where I believe he meets Edith, his soon-to-be wife, the character William Stoner does. And you can just tell she's not interested in him, and he's, you know, just this awkward guy. Maybe I relate to this or something in my youth, but he was just being an awkward fellow, and you could tell she wasn't interested, and she was kind of just trying to push him out and just be like, you know, stop trying to flirt with me, dude. And it just seemed so sad, and I could just see it. I felt like I was living that scene, and I did shed some tears. So it was I think the first book to crack some tears out of me. So it's a sad, but really it is a really enjoyable book, and I definitely got some lessons I could extrapolate out of it as well. The next question on this tag is most beautiful book you bought so far this year. And I don't know if it's the most beautiful book, but man, does she look sexy on a shelf. Gravity's Rainbow, Thomas Pynchon. This is, I think, the first print from Penguin. So I don't know what edition it is. I believe this was like a 80s or early 90s print of Gravity's Rainbow. But I just love this cover. I think this is just a nice nostalgic cover. I don't mind some of the creases to it. The pages kind of have this like musty look to it. Has a little bit of like an older smell to it. I don't know. It does have this one scratch across, so maybe like me picking a blemished book is quite contrary to the question on the tag. But I love this cover, and I think it just perhaps it screams booktube, perhaps it screams classic literature. But it's nice to get some of these very iconic books and covers on my shelf. And the last question on here is which books do you need to read by the end of the year? Now that would be a lot. I would say right now I've read about 30 books, and that should keep me on pace to read somewhere between like 24 and 30, I think, the rest of the year. And one thing that comes to mind is I need to finish this book. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm like past halfway. I'm on the last third of the book, but I need to finish this guy. I just had a video recently about the big novels I'm reading this year, so I need to read The Corrections from Jonathan Franzen. I need to read, next, I'm reading Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina. I'm reading Beloved by Toni Morrison right now. There's a lot of books I need to clear off my shelves before I buy some more books. There's too many to kind of add to this list. But I'll keep you guys in tune or in touch, basically. And hopefully we'll steer away from buying faster than we're reading. But that's going to be it for this video. Let me know what you guys thought about some of my hot takes maybe on some of these books. And also, if you guys do the tag, I'll definitely be watching some other fellow booktubers and their answers to these same questions. So let me know in the comments below any thoughts, recommendations. I'm full of recommendations, but I'm also always taking in new ones. I actually just bought a copy. One second. I bought a copy of The Tin Drum by Günter Grass. I'm going to assume that's how it's pronounced, because of one of you recommending it to me, because you saw that I had The Magic Mountain, and you're like, here's another German author you should check out. And lo and behold, I was in Wyoming and found a copy. So always down for recommendations. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Subscribe for more content like this, like the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.